and welcome to the celebration. This week we're celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the Course Creators HQ podcast, and I want to thank you for being a listener. Plus, let's talk all about podcasting for course creators.
Welcome to the Course Creators HQ podcast, helping you navigate the latest techniques for creating and marketing online courses. And now, here's your host, Julie Hood.
So thanks so much for being here. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for you and for you sharing it with your course creator friends and liking and reviewing. I so appreciate you. Thanks so much for making this just one of the best parts of my week. So today I want to talk about whether or not you should have a podcast. And here's why. I was thinking back to the higher end courses that I've purchased in the past, and every single one of them had a podcast. The course creator had a podcast that I listened to for years before I bought their high-end courses. And they had been in my ears and in my head with their thought leadership, with all their advice, their trials and tribulations, their suggestions, their techniques. So they had built this huge wealth of positivity with me, in that I was positive that they could help me because they already had through their podcast. They were already telling me all these things that could make my life and my business better. And so their courses were just a natural extension to the podcast that I had already been listening to and all that advice that they were already giving me. So I know that podcasting can be a huge helper when it comes to selling your courses. And even with my own course, I went back and I talked to my students, and many of them bought the 24-hour course creator program after they had been listening to the podcast. Okay, so since we know that podcasting creates this belief with your students, should you create one or not? So let's talk about it a little bit. First off, I want to talk about the elephant in the room related to podcasting, and that is the time that is involved in creating it. So yes, you are going to be committing to a marketing technique that is going to require a regular commitment of your time. So you will need to decide, out of all of the things that you could be doing for your course and marketing your course, is podcasting one of the places that you want to spend your time? Now, the good news is I have gotten my podcast down to where in about a couple hours, I can crank out an episode. And that includes, I do my own editing, which is not necessarily the right solution. We'll get into that in a minute. But, and because I do these episodes on my own, I don't have to deal with coordinating with other people's schedules. Most of the time I'm doing my solo episodes, so it's a lot easier that way. It was not that quick at the beginning. I will tell you, I spent a lot more time on it, but that's okay. I got that investment at the beginning of the time, figuring out how it was going to work, what I was going to do. And then now it has gotten very much a routine, and a big part of how I market each week is always having the podcast episode. Okay, so the next thing you need to ask yourself is, do you have a group that you are 100% passionate about helping, that you want to advocate for, that you want to help, that you are worried about, that you want to talk to, even if it's been a long week or you're tired or you've had a difficult week? Do you still want to connect and reach with them? Because that little desire will be what carries you through when you're doing your podcasting. One of the golden rules of podcasting actually is that you need to be consistent. So you're building this relationship with your listeners, and you don't want to just randomly show up for them. They want to see an episode regularly, whatever regularly is for you. I actually prefer the weekly episodes, but you could have a different schedule. It just needs to be consistent. And I'll tell you that this whole timing thing was the issue that stopped me at the beginning. I took a really fantastic podcast class way back in 2016. And as I was thinking through all of the pieces of the puzzle and everything that was involved, I realized, you know what? I'm not sure I have time for this right now. I want to do it. I love to do it. I think I'd really enjoy it, but I don't know if I have the time for it. So I didn't until I came back to it in 2020 as part of the pandemic when all of that was going on. And I was able to launch with an entire group of people who were also putting their podcasts together at the same time. And it was such a wonderful experience for us to do it together. We were able to give each other feedback. We also, on launch day, subscribed to each other's podcasts, left reviews for each other, and it really got me going. So that's the next suggestion I would have for you, is to find a way that you can have a launch day with a group of people that you're working with, because it will definitely keep you on track, keep you focused, and give a little bit more motivation. I mean, I didn't want to be the one who didn't launch on August the 17th, 2020. So you see how that works. Okay. So after a year of doing this, I can tell you that I really only have to spend a couple hours a week to get my solo episodes out. It's more if I'm doing an interview or something, but it has the time commitment has gotten a lot easier after a year of working at it. Okay, third, let's talk about technology. And podcasting has a very specific technology which allows you to upload an episode to a podcasting host who's then send it out so that people can listen on podcast players. And it's unique in that, for example, if I'm listening to a podcast on my phone and my phone, I can go to other apps on the phone. The podcast keeps playing. Sometimes I think even the rest of the phone will go to sleep, but it'll keep playing. So it's a very specific podcasting technology for listening and for distributing podcasts. So one of the pieces is that you have to have a podcast host of some kind. And what I'm really excited about for all my course creators that are using Kajabi right now, they have added podcast hosting into their product line so that you can actually run your podcast through Kajabi. So if you want more information, I'll put a link in the show notes about it. And it's one more way to have one less tool that you're having to use. I personally use a tool called Simplecast. I've been really, really happy with it, but I haven't used any of the other ones. So I can't give you advice on which ones are the best. I haven't used anything else. So I like Simplecast. It does what I need, and it's easy to set up and get launched, so I've been happy with it. The second piece of technology is the editing, and that's where when you're recording, you make flub ups, or your interviewees goof, or you say the wrong thing, or you have too many ums and ahs, and you want to get all of those cut out. Now, I will tell you, I don't do a ton of editing to this podcast. You guys get to hear it straight from my mouth. I do. If I make a big goof, I will cut some of those things out, but you get the ums and the ahs. And I hope that's so that it feels a little bit more like we're having a conversation. Now, there's other people who are much more particular and they do a much more thorough editing job, and so that their podcast can sound really, really professional. That's a business decision for you. You know, what kind of podcast would you want to have? And how much editing do you want to have done to the recording that you do? And the second piece of that is, how good are you at just talking and recording? So for my episodes, I make a few notes. I originally started out with more of a script because I wanted to make sure I was using the exact words that I wanted, and now I've gotten to where I just take some notes and then I start talking. So depending on how good you are at that, you will either have a lot of editing that your podcast requires or not very much. If you haven't done a lot of speaking, you might have more editing that's required. And long term, I really want you to get to a place where you can hire out the editing, because it is something that can be incredibly time consuming. I know all of you have much better places to spend your time than editing a podcast. So put that in the back of your mind, that you want to get to the place, get to the budget level where you can have someone else finish up your episodes for you. You just give them the raw files and then they go at it and make it sound pretty and put the music at the beginning and the end, and they launch it for you each week. The good thing about podcasting and technology is it's a lot easier than video. You don't have to do makeup, you don't have to do hair, you don't have to make the video look all fancy and cool, we're just talking. So that's one of the things I love about it. It's a lot easier, and I will tell you, I do my podcast in my pajamas sometimes. So, okay, fourth, what about content? If you're thinking about a podcast, what should you be talking about? So first, let me tell you about 4 different types of episodes that you can have. And this comes from my friend Adam Shively. He has a podcast and he coaches podcasters, and he has 4 different types of episodes that he recommends. The first one is solo episodes, which is like this, where I'm just talking. The second one is interview, where you're with a guest and you're interviewing them and talking to them to get their expertise. The third type is what he calls a coaching or an audit type episode. And I've done a few of those. I want to do some more. That's where you coach someone on an episode and you talk with them, and so that that experience, then your whole podcasting audience gets to listen to. The fourth type is what he calls a community or panel episode. And this is where you gather a group of people and they're all speaking on the podcast. So it's not just one other interview person. It's a whole community panel group of people. So if you want to find out more from Adam and see how he uses these 4 different types of episodes, you can listen to his podcast. It's called Podcasting Business School. So jump over and listen to that one. And you can also visit him at the website podcastingbusiness.school. Not .com, it's podcastingbusiness.school. And I'll put these links in the show notes for you too. So coursecreatorshq.com/56, and you'll see the links so you can go check it out. So because I'm adding this coaching option, I want to do more of these on the podcast. Just go to askjuliehood.com and you can leave me an audio with a question that you have. And it's really simple. You just click the button and you record, and then I'll be able to give you some free coaching about what's going on. So that's askjuliehood.com. Love to have you jump in. I want to do one of these episodes coming up soon. So solo episodes are actually the easiest if you have lots of ideas. So that's just my little tip if you're trying to figure out what kind of episodes you can do. Okay, so let's wrap up here with some advice for you. If you are considering having your own podcast, here's what I would do. First off, try to make a list of at least 50 things related to your topic that you could talk about for 15 minutes for the audience that you want to help. For the ones that you're advocating for, could you come up with a list of 50 things that you would want to talk about? Then think about 5 to 10 people that you would be interested in interviewing that are related to your audience and could help your audience. So if you can come up with that list, you're in a pretty good place to get your first content ideas up and running. Then my next piece of advice for you is to experiment with talking on Clubhouse rooms or guest podcasting. So guest podcasting is where you jump on other people's podcasts and you talk about your topic. So just see if you actually like talking about your topic. Clubhouse is a great way to just kind of dip your toe into the pool of talking about your topic. Or if you do the podcast guesting, you can have a bit of a longer episode with someone. And it's really helpful to see if you actually enjoy the experience of talking. So, because, I was that kid who loved to talk. And actually at the parent teachers conference when I was in second grade, my teacher told my mother, she said, Julie's doing great. Her grades are good, but boy, I could put her on the ceiling and she would still be talking to everyone. And so here's to all of you who also got in trouble for talking too much in school. Podcasting just might be the perfect thing for you. So the biggest challenge with podcasting, I would say, for a lot of people is what's called pod fade. And by that, it's where people get started and then they just don't have the momentum to keep it going week after week after week, because podcast is a long game. You're not going to publish and see 1 million downloads the first week. It's not a quick home run kind of thing. You need to be willing to put in the work for a while without necessarily seeing a lot of results. But if that's okay with you, I really, really think it's a fantastic way to get your message out into the world and share with your audience all that brilliance and all that knowledge that I know you have, so that you can help them move forward with their lives and their businesses. So I have a quick win for you today. If you're thinking about whether to create an online course and you're wondering if your idea is any good, I have a $37 training that you can get for free. It's a really quick way to evaluate your ideas. So you can get that in the show notes at coursecreatorshq.com/56, or you can even go to /idea and that'll take you directly to get that freebie. So thank you so much. Thank you for celebrating this 1-year episode of the Course Creators HQ podcast. I so appreciate you. Every now and then we'll go back and look at the reviews, and they have me doing a happy dance around my office. Thanks so much for leaving reviews. Thank you for subscribing, following. If you're on Apple Podcasts, you click those 3 little dots up in the corner and you click follow, or you can leave a review if I got something helpful for you today. If you were able to use this podcast to build your business or think about what you should be doing next. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for reviewing. And I can't wait to connect with you next week. And we'll talk all about the next step of creating and marketing your online course. Take care.